The aim of this paper is to discuss the implementation of the cognitive linguistic approach to teaching foreign language prepositions in an e-learning environment. On the example of the Russian prepositions v, in, and na, on, we will introduce the tenets of cognitive linguistics, illustrate how the recent findings in this domain can be used to effectively teach prepositions, discuss how to implement this teaching approach in an e-learning environment, and provide specific examples from an online teaching model that we are currently developing on iLearn. Present-day studies widely discuss approaches, methods, and means of implementing achievements in the field of cognitive linguistics in foreign language teaching. Much attention in such studies is paid to explaining the peculiarities of the use of prepositions. Prepositions are very difficult for students studying foreign languages, since most prepositions are polysemantic words. Another difficulty is that the same sense can be expressed using different synonymous prepositions, which can also cause confusion. In addition, the same preposition can correspond to different prepositions in another language, and therefore their use is often influenced by native language interference. In traditional textbooks, it's proposed to simply memorize either only the basic senses of a preposition or whole list of its senses. Instead of emphasizing memorization, as in the traditional classroom methods of language learning, the cognitive linguistic approach offers an explanation of the peculiarities of the use of language units and proposes a new way of thinking about grammar as a metaphorical or metonymical abstraction based on the universal human experience. One of the key terms which helps to explain the use of prepositions is an image schema. According to Evans, an image schema is a relatively abstract conceptual representation that arises directly from our everyday interaction with and observation of the world around us. In an image schema, the trajector or figure is the focal entity in a spatial scene, while the landmark or ground relates to the background entity that serves as a frame or reference to the trajector. For example, Hostkowitz proposes the following image schemas for the English preposition in. The same image schemas can illustrate the spatial senses of the Russian equivalent of in, the preposition v with the prepositional case. These spatial senses of v plus the prepositional case can be represented in точка в линии, a point in line, трещина в стене, crack in the wall, яблоко в коробке, an apple in the box. The line, wall, and box are landmarks. The prepositional phrase na plus the prepositional case indicates a location on the landmark. For example, ковер на полу, a rag is on the floor, or яблоко на тарелке, an apple is on the plate. These senses of na plus the prepositional can be represented in the following schema. Teaching materials based on cognitive linguistics commonly use image schemas to represent the spatial senses of prepositions. As asserted and empirically validated in several studies, the use of image schemas helps learners to consolidate their knowledge of spatial senses of prepositions and allows them to build a mental link with non-spatial, metaphorical, and metonymical senses, thus promoting language awareness and acquisition. According to Lakoff and Johnson, most senses of prepositions and cases are derived from their concrete, spatial senses through metonymic or metaphoric extensions. A conceptual metonymy is a transfer that functions within the same domain and links concept on the basis of contiguity. One of the examples of conceptual metonymy is a whole for a part metonymy. For example, the choice of the plus the prepositional and na plus the prepositional in some expressions grounded in this metonymy depends on whether the part or the whole is viewed as a container or a support. For example, in the Russian expression «птица на дереве», the bird is in the tree, the word «дерево», tree, whole, is used with the preposition «на», on, because tree stands for its branch, part. Differences in the use of prepositions in this Russian expression and its English equivalent are caused by the differences in metonymic transfers. In the English expression a bird is in the tree, a tree stands for leaves and branches behind which a bird is located. Examples of activities that we use to highlight the differences in the use of the Russian na and the English in include such tasks as explain the use of na and in the following expressions. Цветы на фотографии, flowers in the photograph. Моя сестра на картине, my sister is in the picture. The preposition na is used in these Russian expressions because a photograph and the painting stand for their surfaces. There is a conceptual metonymy, is a transfer that functions within the same domain and links concept on the basis of contiguity. A conceptual metaphor links two different concepts on the basis of analogy. A metaphoric extension involves two conceptual domains in which one, the target domain, is understood in terms of another, the source domain. For example, a container serves as a source domain for many metaphors. Means of communicating information are conceptualized as containers and are marked by the plus the prepositional case. For example, выразить в словах, to express in words, сформулировать в своей следующей книге, to formulate in one's next book, написать в письме, to write in a letter, and рассказать в 2-3 предложениях, to tell in 2 or 3 sentences.
In this part of the presentation, I will discuss how to implement the cognitive linguistic approach to teaching Russian prepositions in an e-learning environment. I will provide specific examples from an online teaching module that Marika and I are currently developing on iLearn. In addressing this topic, it should be first of all noted that it is much more challenging to implement cognitive linguistic instruction on the computer than in a classroom. To say it with Wong, in a classroom, teachers can provide extended elaborations of cognitive linguistic concepts and instantaneous feedback to students' responses. In contrast, it is difficult for a computerized tutor to make instantaneous judgments about a learner's understanding of an abstract concept. End of quote. Therefore, it is essential to effectively structure computerized teaching modules so that cognitive linguistic materials are easily comprehensible to learners. In the rest of the presentation, I will describe the main principles that Marika and I have followed in developing our teaching materials. The software we used is called H5P and is a plugin available on iLearn. It enables the creator to make and share such content as presentations, interactive videos, games, quizzes, and more. We have chosen this software for the following reasons. First, H5P allows to easily integrate visual material into teaching modules. It also offers a wide variety of easy-to-design activities, including different kinds of quizzes. This plugin also allows to integrate audio and video files into the created content. And finally, the content can be easily downloaded and shared. This feature of H5P was important for us because we intend to test the created teaching materials both inside and outside Macquarie. The first principle that we followed in creating our materials was the broad use of images. For example, this is the slide explaining the difference between the use of the prepositions na, on, and v, in, plus the prepositional case. The use of the preposition na is illustrated on the left and the use of the preposition v on the right. In other cases, in order to reinforce the spatial senses of the preposition, we use a combination of schema images and pictures. In this slide, for example, we are explaining the spatial senses of the preposition na when used with the prepositional case. As you can see from the images on the left, na plus prepositional case often indicates the location up, or more precisely, on top of the landmark, as in the apple on the book. However, the location up is less important for this prepositional phrase than the notions of surface, attachment, support, or burden. That is why it is still possible to use na plus prepositional case to describe situations when the landmark is lower than the trajectory, or when the landmark has a vertical orientation. In this case, the trajectory is attached to the landmark or is supported by it, as in the keys on the ring, for example, in the images on the right. We also use pictures to teach students the extended, non-spatial senses of prepositions. For example, the metaphorical sense of the preposition in such expression as быть в чьем-то сердце, to be in someone's heart, can be schematically represented as shown in the slide. In contrast, in this slide, we're drawing students' attention to the spatial sense of na plus accusative case and to its metaphorical extension. In Russian, na plus accusative signifies a destination on the surface. For example, на крышу, onto the roof, or на стул, onto the chair. The phrase that you can see on the left, на почту, to the post office, has a spatial sense and signifies a destination. In contrast, the phrase on the right, билет на балет, stands for a ticket for the ballet performance. In Russian, we use the preposition na in both cases. The reason is that the spatial sense of destination has been extended in Russian to the sense of function or purpose, and we have explained it to students in this way. The second principle that we employed in developing our online teaching materials consisted in the implementation of the competition model. According to this model, in comprehending and producing language, we constantly choose between polysemic items, including prepositions. In their study, which also used the competition model, Wong and others posit that by presenting article usages in contrasting pairs, learners can formulate a more organized knowledge space of the complexities of the article system. End of quote. We apply the competition model when, for example, explaining the difference between the uses of v, na plus prepositional case, which denote location, and v, na plus accusative case, which denote destination, as shown in this slide. The third major principle that we employed stemmed not so much from the application of the cognitive linguistic approach, but rather from the constraints and peculiarities of a digital learning environment itself. It is important to clarify here that the teaching materials that we have created are aimed at independent out-of-class learning and do not imply any kind of synchronous interaction between the teacher and students. In agreement with Hampel, we argue that structure is particularly important in these environments. It is also essential to facilitate the student-content interactions by making these online resources as user-friendly as possible. In terms of structure, we have chosen to arrange the teaching materials in several modules, each of which is built around one pair of prepositions and composed of 20-25 slides. Each module also contains several introductory slides in which we present the topic of the module, establish the learning goals, and briefly explain the tenets of the cognitive linguistic approach. All modules have a clear content and task sequence, which has been found particularly important in online learning environments. All materials that we have created are self-paced, which means that the learners can control the time they spend on each page. They can also control the amount of feedback they receive. In our materials, in addition to the correct/incorrect icon that appears automatically as soon as a question is answered, we have included the detailed feedback button that looks like a question mark. Students can click on it after answering each question. The last major principle that we have implemented, and that I would like to mention before moving on to the conclusions, is the use of a broad variety of interactive quizzes and tasks. These activities have been designed both to present new content and allow learners to rehearse the acquired structures. Here is an example of a drag and drop task to train students in the correct use of cases after the prepositions v and na. In several cases, we have also enriched our modules with carefully selected authentic cultural materials, such as excerpts from popular songs, whose lyrics contain the relevant linguistic material. For example, here is the slide that contains a short excerpt from a popular song called Bilet na balet, a ticket for a ballet performance. By listening to this song and filling in the relative gaps, students will be practicing the use of the preposition na plus accusative case that I have described earlier. In our presentation, we have illustrated how the insights from cognitive linguistics can be effectively employed to teach Russian prepositions. We have also discussed how to implement this approach in independent e-learning environments. It has emerged that there are many merits of applying insights from cognitive linguistics to pedagogical grammar. First, it allows the explanation of prepositions and takes the chaos out of what otherwise might seem a rather illogical system. Moreover, within this approach, the meanings of prepositions are studied not in isolation, but as interconnected to each other. All this arguably contributes to deep learning and retention. Furthermore, the understanding of the similarities and differences in the conceptual metaphors and metonymy in different languages can help students to avoid mistakes caused by linguistic interference. Finally, when studying prepositions through the cognitive linguistic approach, students do not learn the rules, but the information about cognitive mechanisms, which they can use when acquiring other linguistic units, such as, for example, cases in Russian. In this reference, it should be pointed out that while, for reasons of time and space, our today's inquiry illustrated the implications of cognitive linguistics for teaching only 2 Russian prepositions, this pedagogical approach is highly transferable and can be used to teach prepositions and other linguistic units in Russian and other languages. The main conclusion to be drawn from the second part of our presentation is that the cognitive linguistic approach can be effectively implemented to teach prepositions in an e-learning environment. It also appears that the H5P plugin available on iLearn is suitable for the development of the relative teaching resources. We have in fact shown how to use some of the functions of H5P to effectively structure and deliver the study material. It should be, however, remarked that, being the functions of H5P similar to many other e-learning plugins and quiz creators, the pedagogical principles that we have put forward can be applied to develop teaching materials in other programs and digital learning environments. Thank you very much for your attention.